music stars talk about, murder. And look, I understand somebody actually died here. Rock stars will scream about murder. Other rappers will do it. We don't say that's a confession, but when it's a 21-year-old black kid from Jacksonville, it is. We're talking about the government and the way that they're trying to tailor the evidence. An opening statement, Mr. Cooper got up here and he showed you that post and he read it. I am never going to read that post. I don't have that right. First, they're assuming that's what it means. Right? Somebody could have a good day in court, post online, I killed it today. Right? So they want you to speculate that's what it means. But let's assume arguendo, that's what it means. So the government gets up here and they go a couple days later. A couple is 2, not 5. And then he says, getting his tired feet. To try to say, oh, he ran and then went and got a pedicure after that. Again, 5 days later, nobody else is posting stuff. Everybody was trying to get away with his crime, and apparently he just goes out on public to his hundreds of thousands of followers, JSO watching, and confesses. The problem is that, look, there's 2 ways that you can look at the world. You can look at it through clean windows or dirty windows. You look at the world through clean windows, you're looking at it objectively. You start looking at it through dirty windows, everything you see is dirty. And that's what former Detective Smith, now Sergeant, did. He committed, and everything he looked at for Hakeem Robinson was through dirty windows. He was a hammer. That kid was a nail. He didn't look at anything else, despite the fact that there is clearly motive of other people. Chris Brown. We're not arguing that Chris Brown is the one that committed. I don't come into court and make speculative allegations. There was more than enough to look at it. So, Chris Brown. Renata Boston says that the guy that comes out of the woods has shoulder-length dreads. Natalie Gant gave us that little tidbit as well, too. Oh, yeah, shoulder-length dreads. Didn't have shoulder-length dreads, not even close. Butter pecan skin. It's clearly more brown than it is my client. I can't say that I confidently know what butter pecan skin is. I'm thinking of ice cream, but I'm thinking that it's more close to this guy. But there's one other glaring issue with that. Rothermill case. The murder crew is blue, butter, and brown. Crazy Chris. They literally have another murder case tied to Willie Addison. Smith gets up here and he goes, I don't even know his phone number. Talked about it in voir dire. You have to objectively investigate. You can't commit to a case, to a murder case, that is going to change the lives of so many people 2 weeks into the case. If he were looking at this case objectively, he would have looked into Brown. Oh, and don't forget, and I almost forgot this, Barner said Brown was involved. Now, someone would ask, well, why would Barner do that? I'm not asking you to understand the motives of a reliable hitman. I can't get inside of that guy's mind. I don't think any of us can. But is it crazy to think that in his mind he's thinking, first, I got to go with their narrative. But also, the more people I give them, the better my deal's going to be. Yeah, Chris Brown on 2 cases. That's not going to do much. But if you get more people, you can say, I gave you all of these people. There was plenty of people that had a motivation. It came out through Latham, it came out through Brown, it came out through other witnesses, that there was plenty of other people that would have been upset with what Charles McCormick did. None of them were looked at. None of them were evaluated. Instead, they spent the $100,000 to say that it wasn't two other people that we were never arguing that it was. They never acquired any records of Chris Brown. His Instagram, his cell phone records, nothing. Same thing with Dominique Barner as well, too. They don't get his Instagram stuff, and he said that he was on Instagram. He used it to stalk his prey, and also his iCloud stuff. It's willful ignorance. Now, I'm not saying that Smith sat down and go, you know what, I'm going to jam this kid. I'm going to make a choice not to look at it. But he lacked all objectivity within minutes on the case and didn't look at anything else, wouldn't even consider it. Let's change gears now and talk about House of Pain. So we're going to go into the topic now and talk about all the communications and the cell stuff. The government, like they're trying to link, they're trying to shrink Hakeem Robinson, grow the shooter. They're trying to bridge a gap as well, too, with the cell phone communications. They're invisible dots, imaginary lines. They're trying to get you to speculate. Now, first, they're trying to both say that, Hakeem Robinson was involved, that 478-305-9583 number, that was his, that he was using it. They're trying to connect all of that. But that's not what came out. They'll argue it, but it's not what came out, and that's why we're going to go over it here. First, with respect to the House of Pain email account, and they're trying to say, well, there's selfies of Hakeem Robinson in that account. Now, we know that Blue was trying to be the manager of his son, especially when his career was taking off. And any Apple iPhone user knows that you can combine, you can share photo albums. You know what makes sense as well? Something that they haven't disproved because they didn't get any of the further records, that he's uploading photos to his father's account so that his father can manage his Instagram page, to do something as a manager to justify getting payment. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that there is a hole in there that they're saying, well, they're selfies. It must be his phone. It must be him that's doing it. They could have gotten to the source of it. They could have gotten the Gmail records for that account. They could have gotten Blue's Instagram account, literally HOP, House of Pain CEO. But they didn't. Some could say willful ignorance. I'm saying that it's Sergeant Smith, Detective Smith deciding. It doesn't matter. I'm committed on what it is. Now, there's anomalies within the cell communications. Now, they've never actually tied Hakeem Robinson to that 478-305-9583. Smith got up here and he tried to say, well, the IP address, the first four. He's not an expert. We heard from two other cell phone experts. They were never presented with that information. He tried to say, well, the provider told me, that's hearsay. The provider told me that, it's the first four, not the last four, but I subpoenaed the wrong one. It was a 7, it was a 1, but yeah, it could be. Now, the government tried to say that based on what he said, it's a link. His words, could be. But even that is not even close to a connection. They had an FBI cast member agent up on the stand, didn't ask him any of those questions. You best believe that if they tied the IP address of that phone to my client, you would have had an expert from T-Mobile sitting in here going, here's your link. But instead we had Smith get up there and go, yeah, it could be. They're trying to blur the line, trying to connect him to the shooter and the phone to Mr. Robinson. Now, Blue says that he was worried about his son. Given his testimony, I don't think he cares about his son at all. But he says, you know what, I cared about my son. Whether it's him caring or not, there is not a single phone call to that number. You would think that if this is the phone that is being used in the commission of the crime, that somebody would be repeatedly calling it. Now they'll get up here and say, well, it could be a FaceTime call. We have no record of it, the date event. Translation, they want you to speculate. They have never connected that phone over to the shooting. There are communications with one of the people much earlier, not during. There's a pin drop, could be in an area. They're wanting you to speculate. They need you to speculate because they have not made the connection. You remember too that they have the color coded, they may show it to you here, that the red stands for that they even want to connect it before they've connected it because the 478 number is in red, and so is my client's known 1595 number. They have it both in red. The interesting thing is that throughout the entire time of the commission of the crime, you see no red. It's everybody else. Now, mistakes and anomalies with respect to glaring mistake. The cast agent, 7259, 7529, they admit it was a mistake, it wasn't entered incorrectly. Look, you know, in other lines of work, could it be a scrivener's error? Oh, I thought you wanted it medium rare, not well done. In a murder trial, when you're trying to explain, to have a jury make a decision beyond a reasonable doubt, there's no mistakes. That was a mistake. And then we also have the anomalies with AT&T. And he said it, he goes, look, you know, we can't, 95, I forget what the exact percentage was, but he's like, we don't use it because of the anomalies. But they still want you to trust some of the AT&T records. So, staying on the topic of the phones. Now, they brought up in the closing argument that Abdul Jr. had a phone that was registered to Darrell Watts, and that the 478 number was tied to Darrell Watts. What they're leaving out is that Blue's main number was also registered to Darrell Watts. Now, they also brought up this exhibit. It's a nice picture of Blue. He looks like he's, you know, indecisive, not the felon that he is. And they said, he's not going to send a message to himself. His email is literally right there, as if you're not going to see it. It's insulting. From his number, 2370, which is under Darrell Watts, sending it to 9583, and Abdul Robinson 71 at Gmail. Abdul Robinson Sr., born in the 70s, definitely not my client's email. They showed you this photo and made the argument he'd never send it to himself, where literally it shows that he sent it to himself. Talk about the DNA and the fingerprints. We, of course, embrace there is DNA on a shirt. I think it may be out here, maybe, you know, with the white shirt. Doesn't prove that he ever wore it. We talked about it with the expert. If I were to take my client's handkerchief and wipe my brow, my DNA is going to be on it. And she also testified how that very easily could be the reason why there is a mixture, because they take a swab and they do the entire compartment, and that very much could explain, well, the t-shirt's sitting there, then we wipe everything, why there's a mixture and why it's so low. But we embrace that. His DNA is showing up on a shirt that's in the car and also on the dash. He was friends with these people. He rapped about the life that he lived. We are not denying that. He was around them. He knew them. Wasn't doing what they were doing, which is why he isn't covered in tattoos and bullet holes, because he's not living that life. Fingerprint, the music videos. So again, we embrace this, but none of that, and I don't need to go over it because I know you saw the testimony. They both agreed objectively in their testimony, I cannot say he was ever inside of that vehicle. What we know is that his fingerprints are not in the vehicle, and there is not a 700 billion DNA reading of inside of the vehicle. There's a small mixture. The DNA expert got up there and said, yeah, it easily could have been transferred by the t-shirt. The reason why the government's probably arguing it is because they know jurors like DNA and fingerprints. No, it's like that silver bullet, but not here. This means all it proves is that he knows people that we already agree he knows. The other evidence shows that. So don't let them sway you with the idea of DNA and fingerprints. At the same time, too, we have Chifton Hogan. If their rationale of anybody whose DNA is found inside of the car, well, they must be involved. Chifton Hogan and Blue said, oh, yeah, that's a family member to some extent. Anything that supports our argument that if you know people, your DNA could show up inside of their vehicle. Now, let's talk about the witnesses in this case. Latham, the expert. The government, and I said this before, they paid $80K, $70K, $80K, I don't know how much his expenses were flying back and forth and lodging, to come in here and say, yeah, maybe. Meanwhile, all of the witnesses consistently describe somebody that's short and skinny. Then they arrest a guy who's 6'2", 6'3", 230 pounds. That's not how the truth works. How desperation looks. Latham up on the stand, and I asked him, and I go, can you exclude me without scanning me? And his answer is no. And from that you can take, there's nothing unique about what he's saying. He can confidently say, well, it's not Leroy Whitaker, it's not Dominique Varner, not being argued here. But nothing more. Now the government, in their argument, they have brought up this photo. Now we have to talk about Charles McCormick's height and weight. Latham said, well, they provided the information to me and I do the analysis. And what they gave me is that Charles McCormick was 5'10". There's a problem with that though, because I had to bring it out through the medical examiner. He goes, that's just an estimate. Post-mortem, there are differences. Could be 5'9", could be 5'11". Also, this person is wearing shoes. So when that was brought up with Latham, he goes, I was given 5'10". I then. They call the medical examiner, and the medical examiner tells you that's not, I can't say that's an accurate height. But they want to do this comparison in between somebody who's 5'10" and then over to the shooter. We know that Charles McCormick was 143 pounds. We know that definitively. When you compare that over to the person next to him, now, Charles McCormick is obviously turned a little bit, and they're not in the exact same posture, and I'm not denying that. But I could also make the argument that he's wearing darker clothes, which makes things look smaller, and the shooter is wearing light clothes, which make things look bigger. What you don't see is a huge difference, 100-pound difference between the two people. You see two skinny guys. Also, as for the height, yes, they are moving, they're dropped down. Let's do some math here. Hakeem Robinson, let's give him an inch, we'll say 6'2". Shoes, that's another inch. So he's at 6'3". Add then 3 inches on top of the head under that hood. That person's pushing 6'5", 6'6". If that were Hakeem Robinson next to Charles McCormick, 5'9", 5, whatever it is, he would be way taller. But he's not. Again, the government's trying to shrink it. They're glossing over the 3 inches that Latham said, yeah, that could easily be 3 inches on top of his head. I submit to you it could be more. If Hakeem Robinson, those little tiny feet, there's no escaping those little tiny feet. You add an inch onto him, 6'2", 6'3", then whatever's underneath that head, that person is going to be a giant. You are not going to mistake that person for short and skinny, not a dozen times in a row. But they want to get up here and say, Charles McCormick, 5'10", despite what the witnesses said. Hakeem Robinson, 6 feet. tailoring their evidence because they know that the evidence itself, the facts, suck. Now, they may get up here and say, well, we didn't need these witnesses. You cut a deal with violent felons and you don't need them? You cut a deal with Barnum, who's a reliable hitman. You only get the reliable hitman term if you have killed. We know that in these cases there's nothing to establish him as reliable. In Rothermill, they killed the wrong person, an innocent guy in a bike. On this one, he gets caught, but he's a reliable hitman.